Hi, in this short video, I'm going to give you my top 10 tips for investing in buy-to-let. My name is Mark Lloyd, I'm co-founder of Property Master Academy and I've been an investor for over 15 years. So tip number one is research the buy-to-let market. What do you know about the buy-to-let market? Do you know about the risks? Do you know about the benefits of investing in buy-to-let? Now you may be looking at alternative forms of investment where potentially you may get a better return. So have you looked at those too? Because often when people are looking to invest in buy-to-let, it's an alternative investment to other things such as, for example, the stock market or ISAs. Remember that returns on ISAs are of course tax-free, whereas investment in a buy-to-let property is not. Also, cashing in an ISA is relatively straightforward, but cashing in a property is most definitely not. It's very much considered to be an illiquid asset. So if you're looking to invest in property, it's something you should be looking to do for the long term, not for something where you need to get your money back in a relatively short period of time. Investing in buy-to-let means committing tens of thousands of pounds, and you'll probably take out a mortgage too. This of course means that as the market rises, you're able to leverage that growth. What I mean by that is as prices rise, of course your mortgage debt will remain the same or possibly decrease depending on the deal you've actually got your mortgage on. Over time, property investing has paid off for many people, but it is not a short-term investment vehicle. It's something you invest for the long term. And average returns in the buy-to-let market have far exceeded those on savings over many years. If you know someone who's invested in buy-to-let before, then ask them about their experiences, warts and all, or perhaps consider a training program through companies such as ours. The more knowledge you have, the more research you've done, will pay its dividends further down the road. Tip number two, choose a promising area to invest in. So what does that mean? Well, promising doesn't necessarily mean expensive or cheap. Promising means choosing an area where people want to live. Where in your town is there special appeal? Are you in a commuter belt? Is there good transport links? Are there good schools? Where do families want to live? Where do students want to live? You need to match the type of property you can afford to buy with the type of property that people want to live in. Now, whilst it might seem a fairly simplistic overview, it is really important to get these things right. In most cases, people tend to invest where they live or within half an hour of where they live. And that's really a very good strategy to follow because you understand the area, you know what's going on, so you'll be able to keep tabs on the property. But what if your area is an expensive area? What if you don't have the money to invest in that area? Well, looking afield is indeed an alternative option, and there are many areas of the UK that make it attractive to invest in. I live in quite an expensive area, but when I started out, it made it quite difficult to buy much within the budget that I had. So I started to look further afield and invested in the north of the country where yields were much better, prices were much cheaper. But I was still looking for those fundamental principles of where do people want to live. Tip number three, run the numbers. Do your maths on the project. So look at property prices within the area you're looking to buy and compare those with the rents you're going to receive. It's also quite likely you're going to want to get a buy-to-let mortgage. Now, buy-to-let mortgages are generally given at the rate of 75% loan to purchase price. But also the lender wants to take into account the actual rental income being received as well. So, for example, they will want rental cover of somewhere between 125% up to 150%. Now, what that means is that the rental payment must exceed the mortgage payment by those figures. So if we're taking an example of, let's say, a mortgage payment of £1,000 per month, then your rental income should be at least 25% to 50% higher than that figure. Also, don't miss that most buy-to-let mortgages have quite high arrangement fees, so you need to take those fees into account when you're calculating your figures. Apart from the monthly mortgage payment, you also need to take into account other expenses such as insurance, possibly an agent fee, and of course maintenance on the property. Now what I do, I put in a figure of 10% of the monthly rental received for monthly operating expenses, which includes the maintenance. Now if you do that, that should cover you for the lifetime of owning that property. But what is really important is to put aside that 10% into maybe a separate account so you don't come across any unexpected expenses that you don't have the money for. Really important, and it's good housekeeping. Tip number 4, shop around for the best mortgage deal. Don't just contact your bank or building society to get their deal, because there are plenty of independent mortgage brokers available that can help you. And what I would suggest is you contact a broker that specialises in buy-to-let mortgages. They'll have a much better handle on what's available than your standard residential mortgage operator. But you should still do your own research before even talking to these people. Tip number 5, think about your target tenant, or as I prefer to call them, customers, because in a property business you have customers, in my opinion, not tenants. So what type of tenant are you going to target? Is it going to be students? Is it going to be families? Is it going to be professionals? Is it going to be roomlets? Are we looking at key workers? Think about this, because it's really, really important. It will help determine where you're going to actually purchase the property. If you're looking to rent to run young professionals, it should be modern, stylish, but not overbearing. If it's for families, you want to be able to allow them to make their mark on the property. So adding their own decoration, their own pictures and things like that, so it feels more like a home. The more you can do that, the more likely they're going to stay longer. Tip number 6, focus on rental yield. Now, whilst a lot of people get involved in buy-to-let for the potential capital growth, that is a long-term strategy. The initial thing you need to focus on is what is the income yield going to be. To compare different property values, use the yield. So what that means is take the annual rent on the property and divide it by the purchase price to give you a yield figure. For example, a property providing £10,000 per annum of rental income costing £200,000 means you have a rental yield of 5%. The second figure you want to look at is what's called the return on capital employed. In other words, the money you've put into the project. And in order to calculate that, you do a similar equation. What you want to look at is the annual rent received, but this time less all expenses, so agent fees, insurance, your monthly operating expenses. Then divide that by the capital you have into the project, which will give you a percentage return. Now for me, it is one of the best indicators when you're comparing different properties. Tip number 7, look to add value to your investment. This could be, for example, adding a new bathroom, new kitchen, new windows, redecoration, carpets, and so on. These are all things that will add value. Now, of course, to add value, you want to be looking for tired properties, those that need some renovation. You're not really going to be looking for a fully modernised property just to take out the kitchen and bathroom and replace them like for like. You want something where the property's been run down so you can add that value, force the appreciation, as we call it. And that way you'll add capital to your portfolio from a very early stage, having bought correctly in the first place. Tip number 8, don't accept the first price that you see on the agent's window. Haggle a little. As a buy-to-let investor, you're in the same position as a first-time buyer. You have nothing to sell, so there's no chain involved, and that puts you in a relatively strong position. And a lot of agents favour investors for that very reason, because they know there's not going to be hiccups along the way, particularly as buy-to-let mortgages are not necessarily based upon your income, whereas on a first-time buyer it will be, and there's lots of other issues involved. So a lot of agents will prefer to deal with an investor. Now when you're negotiating, it will depend on what the market situation is. If, for example, the market's a little bit softer, so prices are steady, maybe slightly declining, then it's much easier to negotiate a discount. It is also very useful to find out why the person is selling, how long they've owned the property. So, for example, an existing landlord who's owned a property for some time and looking to cash in their capital gain may be more open to a quick sale and therefore a price reduction. Tip number 9, understand the pitfalls of that investment. When you're looking to invest in anything, you should always understand the pitfalls as well as the benefits of that particular investment. House prices increased quite substantially during 2020. Will that continue in 2021? What will you do if there's going to be a price dip? Will you hold on to your investment? Also, mortgage rates are exceptionally low. Have you considered what you would do if rates start to rise? Also, when calculating your figures, base them on the standard variable rate, not necessarily the deal you've negotiated, because when that deal expires, you will move on to the standard variable rate. So what will you do then? Will you still keep the investment? Will you maybe switch to another mortgage? Even in popular areas, properties can sit empty for a while. Now, most professional buy-to-let investors will allow a 2 months vacant period during any year. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be repairs and maintenance over the time you own that property. So make sure you have that fund set aside, the monthly operating expenses fund. Really, really important. I've seen many investors not do this and they've been hit by an unexpected bill. They don't have the money to cover it. So make sure you put that money aside. Tip number 10, consider how hands-on a landlord you want to be. Are you going to be doing everything yourself, finding the tenants, dealing with maintenance issues and so on? Or are you going to use an agent who will take care of all those things for you? Now, if you're going to use an agent, make sure you carry out due diligence on them too. Make sure they're familiar with the market you want to operate in, and of course, check out what their commission figures are. Personally, I don't use any of the large chains. I prefer to use smaller, independent agents because I find I get a much better service, and often you're dealing with the owner of that business too. Of course, if you look after the properties yourself, then it is going to be much better for you because you're going to make more money, but be prepared to work sometimes weekends, evenings, and so on, dealing with the issues that could potentially arise. If you are looking to grow a property business, then my suggestion is find a good agent. Because if you're going to look after the properties yourself, you can only grow so far. You'll be limited in the growth you can actually achieve. Now, you might be fine with that, and you might be looking to move from a job into becoming a full-time landlord, and that will create you an income, but also a job too. Is that really what you want? My mindset has always been, and what we teach our mentees, is to become a business owner and a property investor, where you delegate and use other people to do a lot of the jobs to make sure that it's more profitable for you over the longer term. The biggest problem with any buy-to-let investment is always going to be the void periods, and you can take steps to mitigate that by firstly choosing the right customers or tenants in the first place. Now, if you're using the right agent, they will make sure that the relevant checks are done. You see, if a tenant is happy in the house, they are going to stay there that much longer. So creating an environment that's conducive to whether it's family lets, that's professionals, or indeed students will mean you'll have a much longer tenancy, less voids, and they will look after your property. So that's it. If you enjoyed listening to this video, please hit the subscribe button below and the notification bell so you get notified of other videos as they arise. Also, check out the videos that are appearing on your screen now, as they'll help you progress with your property investing journey.